கங்கை அணிந்தவா கண்டோர் தொழும் விலாசா சதங்கையாடும் பாத வினோதா லிங்கேஸ்வரா நின்றாய் துணை நீதான்.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Talk 10 with Mahen. This is the second episode for the year 2021 and I am deeply honored today to welcome Professor Poobhalan Pillay. Thank you so much for joining us today, Professor. Professor is a brilliant mathematician. In fact, he has prepared support material and study guides that mathematics teachers throughout South Africa are using to prepare their students for Olympiads and for AMISA exams and so on. But apart from that, Professor is very knowledgeable about music. He has a brilliant voice, unmistakable voice, very unique. And I've enjoyed listening to him sing very often at Divine Life Satsangs. And today, especially, we want to have a conversation with Professor about the role of his parents, the late Mr. and Mrs. R. Muthoo Pillay. Now, they were very significant members of the Clearwood community, and we want to listen to inspiring stories of music, culture, and drama that took place in Clearwood. Welcome, Professor. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me, and I look forward to our conversation today.
Thank you very much, Mahen. So I feel very privileged. Thank you very much for inviting me. And also, I want to say hello to whoever is listening in, and I hope you enjoy this program.
Professor, I was so happy to see that beautiful picture. You're sitting on stage, and you have our music legends accompanying you. Sri Gopalan Govender on the Mridangam and Sri Kisraj Raghavan that played the violin.
It is a unique picture, and I felt and I feel very privileged to have sung, in the presence of the accompaniment of great doyens like Uncle Gopalan Govender and Uncle I. Kisraj Raghavan. Uncle Gopalan was one of the earliest musicians who went abroad to study music. During those days, they used to travel by the SS Karanja, and it was a huge battle to go out there and study. And when he came back, he was an expert on the mridangam and the tabla. But one of the great things about Uncle Gopalan, as you know, is that he never kept his knowledge to himself. Extremely humble, and tried to train as many people as possible. In fact, some of the great students of the present time are descendants, almost directly or indirectly, of Uncle Gopalan. Mahendran is one of them, Asokan, and you can probably name others. As far as Uncle Kisraj is concerned, I. Kisraj Raghavan, he too hails from a very strong musical family. Another example of humility. I remember once my father saying that when he sang, and if he made a mistake, Uncle Kisraj will play. And only when my father will ask him, he said, "Well, Uncle Muthoo, I think you could have done this." My father used to appreciate it very much because he had great respect for Uncle Kisraj. Uncle Kisraj was extremely knowledgeable. He had a large repertoire of ragas, which he was very familiar with. And on the violin, he was an expert. At that time, there was nobody to touch him. So in that respect, that photograph is very dear to me.
Everybody loves stories. So tell us some inspiring stories. What went on in Clairwood? What were the role of your parents, your late parents, in promoting music, culture, and drama in Clairwood?
Clearwood was quite exceptional. Excellence was achieved in a number of fields in Clearwood, and music was just one of them. It was originally a marshland, and when the indentured laborers, when they were given freedom, they gravitated to different parts of the country, and Clearwood was one of them. And there, because they knew very little apart from gardening and farming, they took to the marshlands and they started growing vegetables there. And the Durban City Council at that time realized that these people were squatters there, so they quickly decided to cut up the land into small units and made people buy it. And in a quick time, all the plots were bought. And what's interesting was that they bought their equipment, the asbestos sheeting or whatever, left it on their properties, on their little rectangular properties on a Friday afternoon. By Monday, the houses were up. Because the community used to come together. It was true Ubuntu, to come together to help everybody who came there to build their houses. People of Clairwood, they started from scratch. Within 40 years of that, Clairwood became a very vibrant community. There were 8 schools, and each school was within 1 kilometer of each other. Education was thriving, and we have to give credit to Mr. H.S. Dunn, who was one of the founders of education, the son of J.S. Dunn. J.S. Dunn was a friend of Mahatma Gandhi, and that is how he landed in Durban, and our education really took off from that point. And also there were at least three temples, and several churches and mosques. But the 3 temples, the Sararo temple, the Jacob Throw temple, and the Lakshmi Narayan temple, all these temples came up, and there was a sports field, the Skidifa, South Coast District Indian Football Association. There were leagues, soccer leagues with great clubs like Bridgeview and Pirates and Bruff Rangers and so on, the cricket leagues, and gymnastic clubs, tennis clubs. Father was discovered quite early, quite young, by one Masla Mudli, who was the father of Jack Mudli, a violinist in the Lingam Orchestra. So Masla Mudli, he took him under his wing and taught him drama, because he was a great dramatist of that time. And then my father was a very good singer, and that is why Masla Mudli took him on. In 1940, led a band called the Star Orchestra. The Star Orchestra is in existence still this day. But my father was the founder of that band. He used to sing Tyagaraja Bhagavatar, like your father-in-law. He used to sing those songs very well. Of course, Uncle Subbiya was also a great expert in showing the intricacies of Bhagavatar. But even before that, there was another person who he learnt under, whose songs he used to record on his little gramophone at home, called Subbiya Bhagavatar. All these songs he learned by record, so the 78s, and you wind that and you learn. The first radio he got was 17 years after he started music. Before that, it was all gramophone. Yeah, I remember early on Sunday mornings, he'll get up 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and he'll practice his ragas. But he was very good in alapana, All these classical ragas like Moganam and Kambodi and Kalyani and, Hari Kambodi. He used to practice the ragas first. Whenever he sang anything, he'll do the alapana and then sing. So he became quite adept in the alapana style of singing. But over and above that, he was a Tamil scholar. I don't know how he learned Tamil. He must have just did 2 or 3 years of Tamil in Amatikulu, where he grew up, in that sugarcane plantation. But I think he learned a lot of Tamil on his own. During that time, he started writing plays. From 1938 to 1953, he wrote about a dozen plays. Now, the interesting thing about that was he wrote the full script, and he wrote all the songs for all the plays, and he produced them, directed them, acted them, and trained the cast. Now, I have a picture which I sent to you, a 1944 picture. That's the only one I have, where he had the cast of Iya Bhaktan, was one of the plays that he produced. Over and above that, he had a number of students learned under him, not only vocal, but even some instrumental. He even taught violin. The summum glory of his work came in 1953 when he dramatized the Silabadigaram. Of course, he entitled it as Koval and Kannagi.
Mhm.
That play, which incidentally, in which your aunties featured, Senba and Devaki, they were part of that play. They were young girls at the time, and the play became very famous. So famous that it went around the country, to East London, to Port Elizabeth, Cape Town, Johannesburg. During that time, to have a Tamil play, going around the country must have been quite a unique experience. It was sponsored by Mr. Seaman Chetty, next boxer, but we owe our gratitude to him. Now, one interesting story regarding that. When they were staging Kovalan and Kannagi in the city hall, there was a scene in which Kovalan was beheaded by the Pandyan king. Dramatization was so good. My uncle Aris, my father's brother, and his younger brother Moga, they did most of the stage props. It was so good that when the king struck his sword against my father's head, the head fell to the ground with a huge thud. And my grandmother was in the audience. She jumped up screaming. She said, "They killed my son." In City Hall.
If I can just intervene, I hope you still have the original scripts of Appa's writing and the works. Do you all have that?
What I did was, whatever Appa wrote, I gave it to the documentation center in UDW at that time. There was another scene in which a bird flies across the stage and grabs the silambu from Kovalin's hands. He was selling the silambu, his wife's anklets, right? And that whole scene was enacted actually with the bird carrying the silambu away. I don't know how they did it, but with that very elementary means, these people were such creative artists. He also became very well known as a Sarma Kavi singer. The 16th day ceremony, he had actually made that very, very popular, that style of singing. Because he used to compose songs for the mother, the father, the sister, and so on. And they'll all come crying, and the whole audience will go into tears when he used to sing his poignant songs, especially in Raga Mugari and those, Punaga Varari. Those, he used to pull a lot of tears from people's eyes. Later years, he became a progidar. He, despite being married to my mother, he married many other people.
I like that, yes.
Many people, they usually recall that my father or somebody was married by your father. My mother, she had only education in Standard 2, grade 4, when she married my father when she was 16 years old. But I think she must have been quite influenced by my father in many ways. And he gave freedom to take part in community activities, to the extent that she was one of the founder members of the Clairwood Mother Sangam. I don't know whether you have heard of that.
Beautiful picture. What a
Yes.
wonderful band of women that would have really contributed to the well-being of the community at that time.
I think it was one of the first women's group, 1946, where a band of maybe 30 or 40 young ladies got together, and they said that they will take over the religious functions of Jacob's Road Temple at that time, and at the same time make some contribution towards the community, the sort of growing community of Clearwood. And one of the persons who drove that Sangam was Mother, Amma Tirunagavalli Dixon. Yes. Unfortunately, her picture was not there for some reason or the other in that picture you speak about. And in that picture, you would see that it's taken around 1959. And my mother was the president of the society at that time. The Clearwood Town Institute owes its beginning to the Clearwood Mother Sangam. And also the Amman Temple, alongside the Jacob's Temple, that was also built entirely by the Mother Sangam. And with people going from door to door selling tickets for, Tamil movies in Rani Theatre at that time. So it was quite a struggle with collecting money in small ways, but they did it. Maybe I should, at this stage, tell you some of the songs that my father composed. You mentioned Sivalinganada Jayadeva, Gange Chadiyone, Gangadhara Hara. These songs, up till this day, they are still quite popular. And my mother wrote a number of songs, mostly to the Divine Mother, because she used to write songs for the Clearwood Mother Sangam at their functions. So she wrote, and one of the early songs she wrote was Vellai Thamari. And that too is Vellai Thamari Poovinile. That too is very popular to this day. One of the things which was unique about Clearwood was that there were social clubs. It used to be a gathering of teachers and professional people, lawyers and so on. And the activities were based largely on debates, quizzes, games, tani competitions, carom board competitions, and speech contests and all that. My brother Baba and I, we joined a social club called Orient Social Club. Baba, had shown class when in JC when he topped the province with four A's and three B's with the A aggregate in 1960s. That raised a lot of people's eyebrows, and they invited us to come to the club. And we were the only two youngsters in that club amongst all these older people.
Mm.
So we used to really enjoy that. But one particular event that I remember was when they had a quiz competition amongst all the clubs. In one of those quiz competitions, between I think the Andhra Study Group and the Orient Social Club, Baba, as a 16-year-old high school pupil, scored the highest points amongst all those teachers. His general knowledge was quite amazing.
That moves on to your siblings. They are
Yes.
also very, very much engaged in music and culture.
I think in the year I was born, my father started having tevaram, on Sunday evenings at 6 o'clock. Precisely at 6 o'clock, we had to go into the temple and we'll sing the tevaram songs right from Torudi Sabian up to Ambal Terasa. At some point, my father decided to have a group to sing bhajanes. So our family was his bhajan group. And that is when he composed these songs, Gange Chadiyone and all that, largely for the family to sing at 16th day ceremonies. Akka, of course, she was an accomplished singer herself, Ambige, my eldest sister. She starred with my father in the early plays. She even participated in competitions and appeared on television and so on.
Yes.
Baba he sings, but he's more interested in classical ragas and identifying, and he's a great, lover of classical Indian music, and he plays harmonium. And my other sister, Katpaga, she also plays a prominent role in Kyrgyzstan in training the people of the temple there to sing. Of course, my youngest sister, Indra, she also quite an accomplished singer, learnt a number of songs, Sai Bhajans, which she is now actually becoming quite expert in. Yes.
Okay, so what does music mean to you?
It's become a part of me. We were steeped in music, listening to my father singing, from the time we were born, and surrounded by, very good music. And then growing up and being trained by him became a way of life for us. The main thing was music was a means to bring joy to people. So that was an important aspect for me as far as music is concerned, because it brings joy to people. And at the same time, and more importantly, it is a means of worship.
Now, as I said, I was a little girl when I used to attend satsang and listen to you sing. You now a significant member of the satsang committee. In fact, the introductory song that we've used in this program, you are part of the team that recorded it for Divine Life Society.
But Swami Samananda, we were reading his writings long before I went to the ashram. At some point, I went into the binding section. Somebody asked me, they said they needed help, and I spent one day there. And that's the first time I met Swamiji person to person. He somehow took an interest in me, especially when he knew that I was a mathematician. He loved mathematics when he was in school. And then after that, they invited me to come and sing at some of the satsangs, maybe Navaratri or Sivaratri. And I remember going with Uncle Kishraj. But the actual journey began one Sunday morning when I heard that there was a yoga camp. So I went in there, not knowing anything else about it. And in the meantime, it had started on the Saturday. So I was late. But the person at the desk sort of recognized me, and he called Swamiji up. And then Swamiji spoke to me. He says, "No, you can join." And that same day, Mahenthri put me onto the board of management. So it looks as if there was some past life connection. Because right through my stay in the Divine Life Society, there was obviously a very strong bond, between Swami Sahajananda, who was the spiritual head of the society from 1949 till his Mahasamadhi in 2007. I had a strong bond with many other devotees as well, but that was my introduction to it. And that was the year in which I became an associate professor, that year in which I went to this yoga camp. I came to realize that it was only the beginning of another journey, because it is very easy to become a professor of mathematics, I should say. But it's extremely difficult to control anger, control lust, and control all these negative forces. And that is what spiritual life is all about. For the last 50 years or so, that is what I've been trying to do, to develop qualities, that will take me towards God. Being on the editorial committee gave me an opportunity to read and try to understand the Master's sublime teachings. That way, Swamiji forced me to read the Master's literature. Maybe otherwise I might not have done so. So he teaches us how to live, he teaches us how to cultivate virtues and sublimate, other desires, eradicate vices, and so on, so that we can move closer to God. The ultimate goal of human life is to realize God. So Gurudev Swami Sivananda, he gives practical ways of trying to attain that very lofty end. He teaches us to see God in all, and we try to do that, and to know that we are not the body, but we are the Atman, and to believe that, and to feel, strongly that we are just his instruments, and we are just playing his will. That is what I learned from the society, and also to dedicate all actions to God, and at the same time do whatever we can to the best of our ability, and to leave the rest to God.
I think that you are very much embodying all those qualities that Gurudev has spoken about, because
Maybe 4%, Mahenthri.
I admire your heads down approach. When I say that, you conduct yourself with such simplicity, with honesty, with humility, with deep respect, and you are practicing this ability of sharing whatever it is that you know to empower others, to help others. So you are very much a role model, and we're very proud to have someone of your caliber in our midst, and thank you for the fabulous contributions that you are making in your own field.
Whatever we have, they are gifts of God. So these gifts that come from God, whether it's mathematical ability or the ability to sing or whatever, they come from God. It is important to share it. It doesn't belong to us.
Exactly.
And that is the principle that I follow. Yes.
Professor, what are your thoughts for young people about achieving that balance between engaging in meditation, in reading spiritual literature and sadhana, and at the same time balancing the academic work that they engaged in?
Parents must play a very significant role in the development of young people, and that is to pray at least twice a day, morning and evening, right? Thank God for being alive, and thank God for the day. To have regular, satsang at home, the family. Swamiji used to say, those who pray together stay together. So home satsangs are very important. And to young people, one piece of advice I can give, you mentioned meditation. I think it's very important for them to do that, even if it's for 5 minutes, but just to sit quietly, try to stop the mind from thinking. For young people who are in school, it helps a great deal for them to focus on what they are studying. When one does that, and then one goes to the books, you can absorb very much faster, because your mind has just been recently empty. Whatever young people do, whatever anybody does, actually, I'll repeat that. Do it to the best of your ability and leave the rest to God.
Absolutely.
Don't worry about successes and failures. So whatever task one has, they must do it as well as they possibly can, whether they are sweeping or whether they are writing something, whatever it is, do it to the best of your ability and make it seem as if you're writing it to God and it's an offering. So that's very important. The other thing that I'd like to give advice on is about the choice of friends, young people. It's very important these days, with so much of peer pressure and so on, that young people must discriminate when they are choosing their friends. They must think twice about whether somebody is taking them away from good values, and if that is the case, they must keep away from them and try to associate with others who have espouse good values. What Gurudev says, have satsang, keep good company. And there are other things which are outside the so-called spiritual atmosphere, and that is like eating healthy, exercising regularly, building the body and the mind are all very necessary, for overall growth. So I would advise young people to study hard, avoid mediocrity, aim for distinctions. Don't be satisfied with 70%. You must ask yourself, what happened to the other 30%, not how I got the 70%. In the end, all that will give them a good job. But most importantly, with the other things, they'll also have a good character. Good job and a good character together would make a good person.
Professor, you had a very close relationship with Swamiji. I'm referring to Swami Sahajananda, spiritual head of the Divine Life Society.
Many of the things that I've said so far are values that I imbibed from Swamiji. He was a true sannyasi. He adhered to the basic sannyas dharma. Many people in today's age did not understand him. They used to think that he was very strict, but that strictness was just a guise because he was more intent on taking us towards God and destroying our egos more than anything else. Right? And that is why he used to be very strict. The thing about Swamiji was that he himself was a perfect disciple of the master. And he set by example, the kind of goals that we would aspire to. He regarded Gurudev Swami Sivananda as his entire being. Everything that he did, he attributed to the master. He once told me that even if he lifted a cup up to his lips to drink, he would ask the master for permission. He had reached that very high state of surrender. And in that respect, Swamiji was a perfect guru. We believe that Swamiji had actually attained God. He used to say, I haven't attained God for many years. And then around 1999, 50 years after the Divine Life Society was founded, one day he came and said, I got up in the morning and I looked at Gurudev's picture and I only saw the Divine Mother. He says, whatever I looked at, I saw the Divine Mother. And he says, I think Mother Saraswati must have been kind to me because I had just finished editing the yoga lessons, 4,000 pages of it, and put in all the pictures. And I used to work day and night to accomplish that task. And I put all my effort into it. And I think Mother Saraswati gave me that darshan. And he said at the same time, he says, my mind now is a straight line, which means there was no fluctuations. And then the other thing he said was that what I knew before in the head, now I understand it in the heart. All very significant statements. He never spoke openly about the state that he had reached. He said it indirectly so that we have to intuit what he was saying. So he was a very great saint. To me, he was a saint who lived on South African soil. And his whole path of yoga, you spoke about bhakti yoga and karma yoga. There's so many different yogas. But in his yoga, it's the yoga of faith and self-surrender. So the total self-surrender is what I learned, what Swamiji taught. I haven't learned it yet. It'll take a long time before I reach that. Maybe we are still at 5% or so. But that's a part of yoga that he set up for his devotees, and we try to subscribe to it.
Thank you so much, Professor, for sharing your thoughts and your interesting stories and your motivation and advice to us all. We can certainly take much from the conversation that we had today. Thank you so much.